The Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey presents the Forum on the Future of NPO Funding. This program was recorded October 13, 2010 in Mullica Hill, New Jersey. In this video, the keynote speaker, Chris Daggett, President and CEO of the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation. At the lectern to introduce Mr. Daggett is Michael Willman of WMSH Marketing Communications in Haddonfield.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Number one, thank you for coming. Number two, don't think that the microphone is not working because it seems like my voice is not amplified. The microphone is not for you. It is for this gentleman, and I'll tell you more about him and what he's doing in a moment. So whatever you hear is what you hear, so there's no technological glitch. It's just the way it is. My name is Mike Willman. I am the chairman of the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey. I'm going to guess that will leave sort of a, what is that expression on your face, even though you've been nice enough to give us your money, and we're delighted to have you here and have your money in the bank. The Nonprofit Development Center is a 4-year-old organization that is designed to do things precisely like this, to create opportunities to basically enlarge the resource base that not-for-profits across the southern part of the state have at their disposal. It is a terrific opportunity for us to be able to offer you a keynote speaker and a panel of folks who I don't know that we could have done better had we had thousands of dollars to pay out in honoraria or stipends or whatever. So we will tell you a little bit about them. You didn't tell me you get paid. Chris said I didn't tell him that he was going to be paid, and that's because he's not. So that is we are actually on the same track. Little housekeeping, and we understand that there is an accident on 295, and we have a few folks who are registered who are not here yet. So by the time we get through the housekeeping details and we are ready to hear from Chris, we should have been able to accommodate everybody that we're expecting. First thing I have to do is thank the members of the board of the Nonprofit Development Center. They're probably all outside working, but Bob Dentino is the president. He's from Rowan University. Sarah Piddington is also from Rowan. Wanda Hardy is from Creditworthy, an organization that basically promotes financial literacy to create, in turn, financial independence for folks. Pat Bruder is the woman responsible for you being in this room. She is from EIRC. And EIRC, it's almost impossible not to know what they do because you are in their home, their new home. But they are the Educational Information and Resource Center. They do all kinds of stuff for teachers. That's my very poor way of describing what they do. But you're welcome to talk to Pat or any of the folks who are walking around. They wonder, all the staff is wondering what you're doing here because you don't have their name tags on. So like you are interlopers, you are outliers, you are from another planet, who knows. So they may stop you and ask you, and you can tell them. And I also want to thank the gentleman for whose cue I was waiting, Steve Lebetkin. Steve's company does podcasts, does webcasts, and just to show you that we are making a worthwhile use of the huge amount of money that you paid to attend this session this morning, we are going to archive it both in audio and video, and so you will be able to refer back to it. Folks who were not able to join us this morning will be able to go to it, not only hear it, but see it. So we feel really smart. You guys are looking at us like, hey, you're catching up, but we're feeling really good about that. And Steve, you should know his company is, I say this with affection, undoubtedly the preeminent packager of RSS syndications, feeds, stuff like this. So if you ever have an opportunity to want to talk to somebody who is in a position to make a little noise and help you with podcasts, webcasts, and all of the related foo-fa that goes with that, Steve is the man you want to talk to. I'm going to ask you in a moment to pay close attention to what our partner, what the partner of the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey, who would ever name an organization that? The Nonprofit Development, even the list of initial letters is too long. NPDC, SNJ. I mean, it's like a marketer's nightmare. But that's what we are. And realizing that we had a name that was too long and resources that were too few, we have created a strategic alliance with the Center for Nonprofits, which you all know as the statewide organization that does many of the things that we try to do, does them on a much grander scale and does them in a much more comprehensive way. So we are delighted to be one of Linda Zippo's partners. She's going to tell you a little bit about her organization and what being a part of what we do can mean for you in terms of being a member of that organization. Linda, would you like to explain to the folks what your organization does, and then we will hear from Chris.
Sure. I will take slightly more than 15 seconds, but not very much, because I want to hear from Chris, too. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey. This is a great, great session, and I'm looking forward to hearing everything as much as you are. Center for Nonprofits is a 28-year-old 501c3 umbrella organization, and we exist in a nutshell to strengthen the nonprofit community in New Jersey so that you can all do your missions more effectively, perhaps a little bit more easily. We're here for you. We pursue our mission through several broad programs. One is advocacy and public education. We do a lot of work in terms of telling the story about how nonprofits are not only vital to the social engine of the state, but also the economic engine. So we're telling policymakers and business leaders and the public that there are, in fact, 31,000 501c3s in New Jersey, and that nonprofits in New Jersey employ 7% of the state's workforce, 288,000 people. We marshal the energies of 1.5 million volunteers. We expend collectively $32 billion every year. We're part of the economy. And this is a message that policymakers need to hear, now more than ever, given the challenges that are facing our sector. We also do regular research, issues and trends surveys, so that we can get a pulse and a handle on what is going on in the community. If, given the economy, you were in the unfortunate circumstance of having spent more money last year than you took in, you're not alone. 45% of the organizations in our surveys said that happened to them. Clearly we have serious issues that we're dealing with, and we try to communicate what's going on to help fuel policy, strong decisions, as well as inform funders and others, so that we can work together to make the state better. We also are involved as an advocacy organization in a lot of different advocacy issues in Trenton and with colleagues in Washington. Issues like how nonprofits and government partner with each other, or perhaps could partner better. Issues around your rights as organizations to engage in advocacy and be involved in public policy. Issues around fundraising law and solicitations, making sure that the laws are fair to donors but protect you as well. And then there are other two broad components to what we do. One is legal and management assistance and capacity building. We have publications. We have a consulting attorney who can serve as a resource for you on quick questions. We have webinars, workshops, and we are thrilled to be partnering with the Nonprofit Development Center. This is the first that we're presenting together, but certainly not the last. And we have an upcoming conference statewide, an annual conference in December that I hope you'll take information about out front. And lastly, we are a membership organization. We have about 500 organizations that are members from throughout the state. Many of you in this room are, and we thank you for that. And if you're not, I certainly encourage you to examine some of the things that the benefits that membership can bring. There are access to a slew of cost-saving programs, discounts, activities and things that can help you stretch your resources, and they include our newest offering for members, which includes health benefits, retirement, wellness, D&O, and a whole slew of other things. And the last thing I'll mention about membership is if your organization is a member of the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey, as part of our collaboration, you will get a 15% discount on your center membership dues. So if you are not, excuse me, we need a mic after all. If you are not yet a member of the Nonprofit Development Center, it's yet another reason among many in its own right to consider joining. There's information about us out in the corridor, and look forward to talking with you more and working with you more. Thanks.
So I guess you got to pass the mic down. We apologize.
No, go ahead. I think Lois is.
No.
I don't think they're doing introductions. Mike is in charge.
All right. I'm sorry that we sort of left you out in the audio cold. Working?
No.
Okay. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Hard to tell from up here. So we apologize for leaving you guessing We just assumed you could all read lips. Or not working? Laura says it's not working. All right, we're going to deal with this now. You are not hearing an amplified voice. You are hearing an amplified voice. All right, I just have to hold it closer. All right, so again, we apologize. We would have had to charge you more if we had a sound system that was going to be effective. So just look at it as an investment in the bottom line. We are, I don't know, I can't think of the right word. We're certainly delighted. I would say thrilled, except it sounds a little bit, hyperbolic, but it's not, to have as our keynote speaker a person who probably has no peer in terms of his ability to deal with the subject at hand. You know him as the relatively recently installed head of the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, which was referenced any number of times this morning, sometimes with big smiles and applause. What you may not know is that Chris is coming up on at least his 40th anniversary of service to New Jersey, which began as a deputy chief of staff in the governor's office in the 80s. He was a cabinet secretary to the governor back then. He was a regional administrator for US EPA. He was the secretary level person handling all that stuff here in New Jersey. If we had a lot of business people in the room, they probably would have a different reaction to us introducing somebody who was in charge of EPA in New Jersey. He has had a successful career in the private sector and has been involved in an effort which he started, which I'm going to describe as the remediation, redevelopment of properties that were somehow environmentally degraded. Is that fair, Chris? Okay. You probably know him best, or at least most recently, those of you who are not Dodge Foundation recipients, as an independent candidate for governor in the last gubernatorial election in New Jersey. And it is certainly our pleasure to have a UNC Chapel Hill graduate and somebody with a doctorate from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst with us this morning to sort of set the stage. And then we're going to hear from Sidney Hargrove, Doug Schoenberg, Lois Greco, and we're going to hear from you. So I would guess it would be best if you hold your questions for Chris until he's concluded his remarks. And I think when we get to the other folks, we will invite you to, in a nice way, jump in whenever the spirit moves you with a question that you have. So please welcome Chris Daggett. Thanks, Chris.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try this without the mic. Can you hear me okay? Great, because it's a little hard to try to put this in your mouth for a period of time. The one thing that Mike didn't mention is that I have South Jersey roots. So I spent 7 years of my life in Linwood, growing up as a kid, and moved to North Jersey because my father was with New Jersey Bell Telephone Company. Remember that organization from way back when? The Verizon guys certainly know it.
Yes, we do.
My father was transferred he was managing the Pleasantville office and got transferred to Newark. And so as a kid, I moved to Basking Ridge, and I actually have lived there pretty much ever since. But I have great memories of South Jersey, and probably spent almost every summer of my life, a portion of it at least, on the beaches of Ocean City. So I'm a big fan of South Jersey, and always glad to come back down here. What I want to do is just give you a little overview on sort of my view of the world as we're looking at it, and then some thoughts on nonprofits and sort of where we're headed in the nonprofit world and some opportunities that might lie ahead. Mike went through some of my background. I've had the good fortune to have several different careers almost. I've been in the government, I've been in the private sector. I've spent probably the last 20 years since I got out of government in 1990, serving on probably somewhere 10 to 15 nonprofit boards of one kind or another, mostly to do with education because of my background in education, and also in land use and environmental matters because of my background on the environmental side. So I've had the good fortune, I call it, to have had an opportunity to be in a wide array of areas. And then last year ran for governor in part because I was frustrated by a career of watching politicians in New Jersey in both parties not willing to step up and address the questions that face the state, and largely in part due to the fact, frankly, from my viewpoint, that citizens don't get actively enough involved. If we had citizens who were more participatory in their activities, they'd keep people more focused on the issues and maybe able to address some of the problems that face us. So I did that last year and had a chance to once again get around this great state and see a wide range of people, a wide range of organizations, and once again renew my interest and faith in this state ultimately, because it's a great state. But there are a number of problems that are facing us right now that make us all take pause. I mean, in some respects, things seem to be spinning somewhat out of control. We've got a political situation where people don't have much vision. The two parties are polarized. People seem to be paralyzed in activities. We have a collective inability to make decisions, if you've ever noticed. We can't make a decision about much of anything in government these days at any level, whether it's the local level, state level, the federal level. There really is a remarkable inability to come together in some mature and reasoned and policy-oriented fashion to make decisions about how we ought to move forward. Many systems seem to be broken in the way government works. Government's breaking down in a number of areas, and as government gets cut more and more, contrary to popular opinion and maybe what people think is the best thing to do, yes, we need to slow down government maybe in some areas and cut back, but too often people don't realize the impact that has on the delivery of services, which I'll speak to a little bit more in a minute. The business side of things have melted down. Wall Street, everybody was impacted by what happened in 2008 timeframe. I can just give you an example with the Dodge Foundation alone. We lost $100 million in about 3 months. So we went from giving $15.5 million a year to $10.5 million a year. Big impact. I mean, we'd love to fund, your organizations that you represent are wonderful. I'd love to be able to fund all of you. But as you can imagine, like everybody else, we have a budget and we have difficult decisions we have to make on a monthly and annual basis that make it so that we can't do all the things that we'd really like to be doing. Sure. I'm not using the mic, so.
Oh, okay. That's what they told me.
Oh, okay. You can hear me, can't you? Okay, good. We have pension and health care costs that are ballooning out of control in the public sector. We have government debt that's making, in fact, there's a couple of stories. I don't know if any of you get the New York Times either online or read it on a daily basis, but there's two stories on the front page of today's New York Times that bring even more bad news, in the sense that in New York State alone, the health care benefits for public employees are underfunded by some $200 billion, just the health care benefits. And the pension benefits are somewhere, they think, in the 100 or 70 to $100 billion range. In New Jersey, our health care costs are somewhere in the $60 billion range unfunded, and our pension liabilities are somewhere in the $40 billion range. At some point, people are concerned that we're going to have to choose between paying off government bonds that governments have floated to build roads and bridges and other sorts of things, and paying pension and health care benefits for employees. That's a pretty ugly choice. So, not a good sign. Foreclosures, we all know the story of foreclosures, and now there's a moratorium on foreclosures, so that's screwing things up even more potentially. Some of the decline in the foreclosures and the problems with homeowners and that we see, people saying things are looking better. Well, the things are looking better because the debt is being written off by the banks. I mean, they're just erasing it. So it just doesn't show anymore. It's not that people are in any better shape than they were. It's just that banks are writing off the loans. We have jobs that people are saying, median house prices are down some 20% since 2005. And at the rate of inflation today, it'll take 13 years to get houses back to the prices the way they once were. Commercial vacancies, somewhere around 20% on average, depending on where you are. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes a bit lower. Demand is low, consumer confidence is low. Not a happy picture. In the social side, the gap between the haves and the have-nots, and some of you who work directly with these folks who are in need know day to day in a very upfront and direct fashion how the gap between the haves and have-nots has increased to the point where it's almost an embarrassment at times. I mean, it's we have people who are just astronomically wealthy in the face of people who are in great need of one kind or another. And then finally, even the churches. We see the churches are in turmoil in different places. The Catholic Church has gone through an awful lot over the last number of years. So the signs are not so strong. And so collectively, it's made people have not a lot of trust in institutions, no matter where they are in our society. And that has also spawned an increase in all kinds of health care and mental health problems. It has led to a lot of anger, and that anger gets focused on government workers. It gets focused on teachers. I mean, you know, you almost ask, where are we going here? So profits are going up. But why are profits going up? Because they've wrung all the costs out of things, not because we're getting jobs. It's a jobless recovery. Seems like the prediction is it'll take 9 years to recover the jobs at the current growth rate of the economy to where we were at the highest rate of employment. And that doesn't take into account the 5 or 6 million more jobs that'll come that need to be created just due to population increases over those next 9 years. So the job outlook is that this is going to be a long-term problem. And then, of course, ultimately that leads to a lot of pressure on all of you as nonprofit leaders of one kind or another. All the social service providers that we talk to are struggling. I sit also on the board of the Schumann Fund for New Jersey, and we've restricted our grant making now. We provide, Dodge Foundation doesn't really provide funding for social service providers in the way that the Schumann Fund does, for example. But in the Schumann Fund, we also do education and public policy, and frankly, we're slowing those down and making what money we have, we are putting in and trying to keep level those monies going to direct providers of direct services to people. And the most frustrating part from my standpoint is that with all this talk about cutting government, is that people don't appreciate the symbiotic relationship between government and social service providers and nonprofits in this state and across the country. To wake up one day and find that all money for after-school programs is cut. Boom, gone. Whoa. All kinds of kids now are in difficult situations, and parents who are relying on those services now are at the workplace and they can't focus. 3:30 comes, where's my kid? What's going on? I start getting nervous. My productivity declines. We don't think about the impact of all these things and how when you make cuts in government, you got to think about those cuts and try to do them in a way that makes sense and doesn't just do it in this fashion that has been done in many places around the state and the country. It's a devastating impact on social service providers. But I try to be optimistic. I've been optimistic all my life. All my life I've believed that tomorrow's a better day. So we have to figure out how to do that. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But you know, in many respects, the time to be most optimistic sometimes is when you're at the lowest point, because you keep saying it can't get any worse. It can't get any worse. So you start to figure out how you make things better, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's talk a little bit about social sector trends. And some of these, I got to give credit to La Piana Consulting, which is a nonprofit management consulting and research firm. And actually, someone here was with Dress for Success. Where was somebody? Right. I give some credit here also to Nancy Lublin, who I heard speak the other day, and she's the founder of Dress for Success, and now is the CEO of DoSomething.org. And I don't know if you know about that organization, but she took it over in a turnaround type situation. I think it was something like $250,000 in the hole, and it wasn't serving that many people. I think they now serve some 2 or 3 million people across this country. She has done a remarkable job of turning it around. So let me go through some of the things I've really mentioned, but nonprofits are facing lost revenues due to lower government and foundation budgets, and also to reduction in giving by corporations and individuals, all at a time, as we just talked about, of increasing need. There's demographic shifts that are redefining participation. We're going to have a minority-majority shift in terms of population in this country in around 2042 by projections going out, where members of minority groups will outnumber members of the white majority. We're going to see an interesting statistic that I heard the other day. People who are over 85 are moving out of Florida. And all the people who are retired moving out of Florida. You know where they're going? Does anybody know where they're going? Cities was one point. They're moving back in with their kids. Can't afford it. So the kids take them in. It's easier. So, I mean, there's shifts of all kinds going on demographically. So those folks are coming out and going elsewhere across the country. There's a number of demographic and institutional shifts occurring that we have to think about. Technological advances are changing the game in amazing ways. Email, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, new organizations that can arise out of nowhere, sometimes overnight. It's also less expensive to start new organizations. The technological revolution is something it's just got enormous possibilities, and it's only limited, I think, by our creativity. We have to figure out how to do that, and that is going to also have great implications for the nonprofit sector and how we use those to help serve people better than we are today. Storytelling is having a greater and greater impact. People can tell stories and get it out quickly, and those stories are important parts of fundraising, as many of you who are in the development side of your nonprofits probably already know. This trend in technology is also allowing networks to be organized, and we can deliver work and we can deliver services in new ways. CTOs, Chief Technology Officers, are rising in number and importance. I don't know about all of you, but I often need somebody to help me figure out the technology, but they are getting better and better at figuring out how to build networks and connect people. And you've seen some incredible growth of nonprofits in a short period of time using some of the new technologies that we have available to us. The interest in civic engagement and volunteerism, and this is another positive, is rising. And it's impacted in part by unemployment, the retirement of baby boomers, and all these new ways to get involved. Sector boundaries are blurring. Corporate leaders head major foundations, businesses have nonprofit subsidiaries, socially responsible corporations are starting these new organizations called L3Cs, where you can have, it's basically a nonprofit, but you can have some profitability. Investment houses are competing with community foundations for donor-directed funds. It's basically a lot of people are crossing lines here and getting involved in a lot of different things, and we have to, again, figure out what does that mean? How can we take advantage of this? And again, provide wider array and more directed services to people than we have until now. Mobile donations are increasing. You ever had any experience with that? Somebody says you see something, you have a text, you can donate right off your palm. Boom, $25, $50, $100, whatever it is. But mobile donations increasing is also going to have to be something that people figure out. What does that mean when I'm trying to raise money for our nonprofits? Social causes are becoming an integral part of business. Brand loyalty is shaped in part by cause, particularly when it's linked to products. So you're seeing social causes being adopted by different organizations as part of their for-profit activities. And then the old standbys still work. Galas, fundraising dinners, direct mail. I don't know about you, but that's the majority of what I get in my mail. It's just today, the handwritten note is almost gone from people, but occasionally you get one, but most of it is now direct mail appeals of one kind or another. But they do work. Or at least if they didn't work, people wouldn't be using them, believe me, because they cost a lot of money, as you well know. So what kind of new competencies are going to be needed for success? We're going to have to move towards shared leadership. We're going to have to be willing to share our successes. And that's one of the interesting things about our younger generation coming up, people in their late teens, early 20s to early 30s. Boy, when they have some success, they share it quickly in a lot of ways. I mean, it starts moving around so fast in this technological world, and then people say, wait a minute, that gives me an idea to do something else. And so the sharing of that information and the sharing of leadership in organizations is something that I think is going to be required for success going forward. People are going to have to adapt more quickly to the changing circumstances that they're faced with. All kinds of activities are occurring that make you have to say, well, wait a second, are we doing this the right way? Should we be trying to figure out a new link with some other organization? Should we be providing the services in a different way? How can we adapt to the quickly changing and ever-changing environment around us? Collaboration. You got to start working together in a lot of ways. And by the way, I say this to you as nonprofit leaders. I also say it to us in the foundation world. Since I got on board a few months ago, I've been pushing hard to get foundations to work together more. Now, there is a Council of New Jersey Grantmakers in New Jersey, which is a great organization. But I'm talking about little networks of groups. I've already had a meeting with the heads of the Taub Foundation together in one meeting, actually. Taub, Schumann, Dodge, Fund for New Jersey, Community Foundation for New Jersey, and Victoria Foundation. And down here in South Jersey, met with the Community Foundation, with Sydney, and with William Penn Foundation. And there are others. But these little collaborative efforts, because ultimately what I'd love to see is more opportunities so that, you know what it's like. You put an application into Dodge to try to fit our guidelines. Then you kind of twist and contort yourself a little bit, and you put virtually the same application, but a little different, into Victoria. And then you go over to Sydney and say, Sydney, I need a little money, but your guidelines are a little different. Before you know it, the original proposal, which is still the same thing you're trying to fund, looks kind of different when you look at all the different things that you're doing. So we would be well served if at times, at least, maybe not all the time, but sometime could have one common type of application that you could fill out so that you don't end up spending hundreds of hours doing this work, which I know you do on an annual basis of chasing money. But collaboration, also mergers. You know, it's tough when you're working hard on something and you believe that you really want to do it and make a difference, and somebody's doing something similarly. Sometimes there's a little competition there, when maybe it might be better to not only collaborate but maybe merge organizations, particularly in light of some of the difficulty in economic times right now. So people are going to have to be willing to think about those, and it goes back to this idea of shared leadership and sharing success. You have to think about how you develop talent coming up. There's a lot of people that want to get involved. Well, how do you train them? How do you get them up to speed and able to work with you? And how do you deal with things like people who want to donate only 2 hours of time? Because there's a lot of sort of micro involvement, let's call it, where people don't, they work a lot, but they want to give something back to their communities or something back to their states, so they're getting involved for very short snippets of time. How can we make use of that? And again, how can we make use of that and maybe make it even more powerful because of the technological changes, and how can we combine the two? Succession planning. Boy, we see people all the time that some great leaders, but thinking, man, the day that leader retires, dies, moves out of state, whatever, the organization's going to fall apart. So you have to think about succession planning if you're going to have a successful organization. And then one of the positive things that I see coming is the increase in interest in innovation, research and development, trial and error, risk tolerance. that's starting to ease up a little bit, I think, and people are starting to take more risks and do more things. I've been concerned because over the years that I've seen the foundation community, you know, we occupy a unique niche in the world in that we get to dabble on the edges, to make people nervous, to make them think a lot, to just try new things, almost like a venture capital approach. That used to be what foundations did a lot of. When I grew up in the 60s, I think of the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, all they did in education and other areas, they were always on the edge experimenting. And then over time, people said, oh no, you got to make sure everything you give money to is a success. Well, sometimes failure could be a success. You know, you can learn a lot through failure. So if you fund, say, 20 organizations in a small amounts of money, and maybe 15 or 16 of them don't get there, but in the remaining 4, one of them makes such rapid advances and such broad advances that it's worth every dime that you lost on the other ones. It's sort of a venture capital approach to investing in the nonprofit world. And so I think we've got to have more of that. I'm going to try to push Dodge more in that direction. Some of our board members are interested in that. Not always easy to do, and but something worth thinking about. We've got to use evaluation as a learning tool, not as a weapon. You know, I mean, you've got to give people good feedback. It's got to be timely. It's got to be in the right context. It's got to be oriented toward improving the situation, not figuring out how to play gotcha. You know, we talked a little bit yesterday. We were in a training session. Actually, Sydney was there as well. You know, it's interesting. I can remember in the first really big lesson I had in government, I was a lot younger, back in the early 80s, and I was appointed the regional administrator of the US EPA. And the Superfund program, if you all know what that is, that was the tax that was originally put in to clean up hazardous waste sites that were abandoned. Well, there was a lot of money, and New Jersey was very aggressive in the beginning of going after it. At one point we were getting, I think we got something like 30% or 35% of the nationally available money to do the investigation stage, not because we're a dirtier state than others, but we were really aggressive in the early days of the Kane administration because it was a new law, and there was a lot of money in it, and we went after that money, and then we had a lot of money on the design side, and we were all over the place trying to deal with these hazardous waste sites. But the region that I was the head of, Region 2, was an odd mix. It's New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And if I treated one group a little differently on a cleanup, because it made sense, right? And there's no two things are ever exactly alike, particularly in the world of cleaning up a hazardous waste site. But if I treated one person a little differently than another person, I'd get hauled down to Congress and I'd have to testify before John Dingell, who was then the chairman of the Environment Committee of the House of Representatives, and they would beat us up. How come you treated this person differently? Well, it made sense. Well, that's not what the law says. And so my staff sit behind me, and they'd see I'm getting the pants kicked off of me, and they'd sort of say, I get it, and I didn't have to say a word. And I wouldn't mind taking that heat because I felt that was part of what you do in those roles, is you stand up and you say what needs to be said, and you run things as you think they need to be run. But the staff would say, boy, we got to protect our guy. So we're never going to do that again. So now we do all these crazy things. And government, I think of government that way in a lot of ways. We treat everybody the same way, and we evaluate. I mean, it was interesting. It's almost against logic, in the way we want to be democratic and open things up, but at the same time we close them down by the way we run our government, and we restrict people from doing things. We restrict creativity. We restrict innovation, and we use evaluation more as a gotcha. You know, I got to get these guys, or I got to figure out how I can show them. And that's where one of the reasons I ran last year for governor, because that's what I think the two parties do all the time. It's all about gotcha. It's not about, boy, what's the best thing for what this state or what this country or what this community happens to need. So we got to use evaluation more as a learning tool to say, how can we better understand this and provide services that are better, or whatever it is we're working on. And finally, we got to talk about strategic thinking. We've got to be much more strategic and visionary as we look out. What's the best way to put this together? You can't have blinders on in this game. You got to always be looking at the bigger picture and saying, how does this fit in with everything else that's out there? As all of you struggle with your nonprofit activities, the one thing I'd also tell you is we at Dodge are deeply involved in what we call technical assistance. We don't just give grants. We give grants, and then our belief is we don't toss the money, or you don't send in, an application or a proposal. Then we send you the money, then you send us a report, and that's sort of the relationship. Before you get money, we're talking to you. We're trying to figure out what you're doing, how it fits in with the rest of the world out there. But then if we give you money, we're also all over trying to help you be better as an organization. So we provide technical assistance, training in board development, in fundraising skills, in succession planning that I talked about. We think that it is critically important to have conversations. We welcome people coming into Dodge just because they have an idea. They want to talk. We say, look, nothing ventured, nothing gained, but we're not telling you we're going to fund you. We may never fund you. We may have a conversation and we shake hands and that's the last we see each other. But we encourage people to come in because we learn and we think you learn in that process. And so we keep trying to train. And so if you haven't seen it, there's a great book that we actually just we handed out yesterday called Nonprofit Life Cycles by a woman named Susan Kenny Stevens. Published in 2001 and again a new edition in 2008 out of a little publisher in a place I'd never heard of, Wayzata, Minnesota. W-Y-Z-A-T-A. But at any rate, that seems to be the Bible for a lot of people on the area of technical assistance and helping nonprofits as they figure out how to move forward. And importantly, in our training programs, the thing that I think is most valuable that often comes out is that one nonprofit organization sees that another one is going through the same life cycle. So you're not alone in this game. The struggles you have as you begin with an idea and turn it into a program, and then you start to think about a board, and then you're in a growth phase, and then maybe you're in a bit of a decline phase, and maybe sometimes they just go out altogether, but you have to figure out where you are in the life cycle and how you should be operating within that part of the life cycle. That's important to know that you have peers in the nonprofit world going through that same struggle, and people learn a lot from each other in these sessions as they talk about it. So I would encourage you all the while to work with one another in that fashion. And my final point is, I told you I'm an optimistic person. I really do believe that despite all the negative things out there, there's a spirit in this country, there's an entrepreneurial edge to this country that's still second to none in the world. We need to figure out how to unleash it. We need to do things. I would invest more, if I were able to wave the magic wand, I'd invest a lot more in R&D and in some of the things like I've said about the venture capital approach. One of the things I want to look at is maybe getting some of my sister foundations to work together to put a pool of money together. Whereby we give out almost the concept of micro grants, $5,000, $10,000 grants to people with a good idea. It might be in the sciences, it might be in math, it might be in the nonprofit world, it could be in providing social services. I don't care what it's in, but just providing a start. I'll give you an example. I sit on the board of something called the Children's Environmental Health Center at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. They've been looking for years at the impact of environmental exposures on children's health. And we're actually coming up with some very interesting things that show that there are specific times in the gestation cycle or in the womb, if an embryo is exposed to certain chemicals, it will have not a good impact going forward. And they're starting to tease out. They're trying to tease out things like causes of autism and some other things. They don't, nobody's quite figured that part out yet, but we are starting to find some interesting things. Well, we had some extra money that we were able to raise, and we gave out these little $5,000 and $10,000 grants. And I just read this last night, actually, in an email, that the $300,000 that we've given out so far has resulted in $1,400,000 in additional monies that have come off of that, because kids are doing something, and all of a sudden they apply for a grant to the National Institute of Health. and they get $500,000 because they had an idea. One kid came up with an idea apparently, and I'm not, so for you scientists in the room, if I screw this up, but apparently it's not easy to get blood samples from placenta. This guy developed a little technique to do that, and now it's being patented. I mean, there are things going on in people's minds that we need to just unleash. And so for a small amount of money, if we as foundation community could put together $2 million and give out 5,000 and 10,000 grants, a couple hundred of those a year, imagine what we could unleash. It would be the kinds of things that would assist all of you in your work. It would lead to greater activities. It can lead to jobs. I mean, some of these become businesses. And now we have job creation. It keeps kids in New Jersey. Instead of leaving, going elsewhere to get an education or go somewhere else where things are more entrepreneurial, if you will, and more innovative. Heck, we used to be the mecca for research. Bell Labs, Sarnoff, Edison, all the pharmaceutical companies, telecommunications. And now, over the years, we've declined. We should spur that again. It doesn't take a lot of money. So I am very optimistic that if we can figure some of those things out, I'm not worried. I mean, yeah, it's going to be some rough times, and we all have to sort of stick together and figure out how to do it. We got to be smarter about where we make cuts. We got get smarter about how we make investments. But in the end, I believe deeply in the value and the people of this state and their ability to go forward on it. And you in the nonprofit community, in many respects, in my view, lead that world in a way that very few people really appreciate that are going day to day through their activities. I have great respect for the nonprofit community, probably as much or more respect than I do for the business community, although I recognize the link and the importance of both. You do incredible amounts of work with very few resources, very few staff members, and the state of New Jersey ought to hold you in a lot higher esteem than I think it often does. So I'm hopeful in the future going forward, and I'd love to hear more from you as to what you're doing, but at least those are my thoughts for the morning. Thanks.
All right, we have a couple of imperatives we need to respond to, one of which is that Chris has some other obligations that will not allow him to be here when we conclude. So what we need to do now is have some really judicious choices of good questions that would represent broad-based interest in the room. I'm sure Chris will be delighted to respond. Just so you know, when he was talking about the Superfund sites and all that stuff, if you need to bring that home as you leave, if you parked on this side of the building, look to the left and you'll see some white stuff. That's the Lopari landfill, one of the most famous of the Superfund sites in New Jersey.
That's Lopari landfill next door.
Right next door.
Well, in 1984, I sat on Alcyon Lake, which are those of you around here know that Alcyon Lake is right here, with Jim Florio, who was then congressman, Jim Hughes, who was then a congressman, Frank Lautenberg, who was the U.S. senator, and I'm not sure if we had, who was the other U.S. senator at the time in '84? I'm going to draw a blank for a second. But at any rate, I signed the record of decision at EPA to clean up that site. It was the #1 site on the Superfund list, so I had forgotten how close we were. Great place.
If you glow when you leave.
Nah, you're not going to glow when you leave.
It's either the substance of the No, just kidding. Just kidding.
We're not going to glow.
All right. So, yes, Bruce.
First, I just want to acknowledge, on behalf of Asbury Park, the Dodge Foundation's support to many organizations, and we appreciate that. I was very encouraged to hear sort of the discussion on kind of both sides, you know, of acknowledging the changes that need to happen, and I think many times it's sort of, well, you nonprofits need to change and not necessarily looking at the funding community. So I really appreciate that. And on that line, I do some work in this whole notion of impact investing, you know, using using investments that are using foundations' resources, not just for grant making, but also for loans and other things. And there's a whole kind of, you know, I think trend and opportunity really to look at capital and look at the resources of groups like foundations more expansively to see all of the resources. I mean, you can definitely use your balance sheet for a lot of different opportunities, but I think the broader concept is funders looking more broadly at their resources and ways that they can even start to blend different sources of capital.
And your question is?
It's just if you have thoughts about that trend of.
Everybody able to hear that comment about impact investing and the role of impact investing? I'm glad you raised it. The foundation community that's the hot item, but there's several. You hear it as socially responsible investing, which I think of as the old don't invest in South Africa, don't invest in tobacco companies, those sorts of things. Then that's right, negative screening, basically, that is. Then you have program-related investing, and you have another area is now mission-related investing. Now, mission-related investing is more to say, for example, Dodge is focused on education, the arts, and the environment at the moment. Mission-related investment would be one where we actually are trying to get a good return on our investment. So we would invest in a for-profit entity in order to get a return, so that instead of giving grants, we might invest in some area and we grow our corpus because of the return on that investment. There are some people who think that we ought to be putting a very big percentage of our money into that, which would take away the whole world of having to do grant making, frankly. Now, I think it's a little trickier because there's not a whole lot of arts organizations that are going to provide the kind of returns that would keep growing our corpus, or maybe even on the education side. The environment side, maybe some. Real estate side, certainly, and there's some relationships to the environment on that. And then there's the there's loans where we'll get our money back, but we won't get a return. And all those are being much more considered now by the foundation community than they once were, as a way to spur change and improvement in the nonprofit world. So I'm glad you raised the point, because I didn't cover it in the remarks I made. We're now talking about putting maybe up to 2% of our corpus in that world, but we just have our toes in the water. I'm in the early stages of doing my homework on it and trying to figure out how Dodge might play in that game.
Yep. Yeah, I was very interested to hear your comments about evaluation. I mean, we've been putting evaluation systems into each of the 150 programs in New Jersey, and they actually evaluate people quarterly, and we've managed to turn that into a motivating process. Now, the point I wanted to make is this: what we've also found is that where we've got that kind of platform in place, we've been able to talk to corporate givers and foundations, and found it has been much easier then to raise money for those organizations on other programs. So there's the link. I was asking for a comment on that.
And I assume you're more easily able to raise money because you can show impact to the corporation.
Yeah, we actually have these online dashboards so that they can see it 24/7 what's going on.
And Doug, I'm sure will speak to that, but that's one of the things we talked about yesterday, is the importance of giving feedback on a timely basis and on a regular enough basis so that you can demonstrate those things. So it's not only to be able to help grow and to improve an organization, but also as a fundraising tool, it's not a bad way to go, because you can demonstrate your success over some period of time. I agree. I mean, I think it's an important component of it. And I'm sure Doug will speak to that more as well. Go ahead, Eric.
The bad news about our current situation is that the economy is in terrible shape, so we're not growing. The good news about our current situation is the economy is in bad shape, so we're not growing. I worry about when we get back to growth and we start consuming more, we start having more babies and all the rest of it. What's the role of the nonprofit community in changing the direction towards sustainability?
You could all hear that question, right? Important question. Our overarching themes are sustainability and creativity at the Dodge Foundation, and there are a lot of things going on right now to infuse in the education system more thinking about creativity, to infuse in people's daily lives more thinking about sustainability. And you're seeing it, there's a group called the Cloud Institute, which has been working with us, a woman named Jamie Cloud, who has been doing a lot of work trying to transform education programs into training kids about the value of energy conservation, of all the different bells and whistles, if you will, that lead to sustainability. Well, in addition to that, we have a program called Sustainable Jersey, which I hope that you have all either heard about or maybe even are involved in some fashion. Basically, are any of you familiar with the concept of LEED certification for buildings, basically green buildings, and you get points for certain environmental and energy pluses, if you will. About 5-6 years ago, I guess it was, Rush Holt, the congressman, got what that dreaded earmark. Remember the earmarks that everybody fought about? Rush Holt got an earmark and created something called the Municipal Land Use Center at TCNJ, College of New Jersey. At the same time, and it was to help communities in their land use decision making. At the same time, Rutgers started something called the Sustainable State Institute. And they started collaborating, and out of that, the heads of those two groups had an idea and worked with our program officer at Dodge, a woman named Michelle Napick. And they came up with the idea, why not have communities get rated on sustainability? So if you did certain things, if you have an environmental commission, if you put LED lights in your street lamps instead of incandescent lamps, I mean, any number of things. So it started out as a green program. And you'd get points. And if you got enough points, you get bronze certification. And then we started to develop silver, and we want to eventually go to gold and platinum. But interestingly, along the way, and we funded this was a big bet in the Dodge world. We put $75,000 in the first year, then $250,000. We put $400,000 in this year. We don't give grants of those sizes usually. And the reason we did was this thing took off. We now have 300 communities in New Jersey who have signed up for this program. About a dozen were certified last year as bronze. Another 100 applications I think we're expecting this year. What it's done is it spurred all this interest in the communities on how do we become more sustainable. And then that led to expanding the concept of, well, what does sustainability really mean? It's not just about energy and the environment, it's about arts. You have arts programs? What about, what do you do with food? How do you get food? You know, my biggest dream, I'll tell you, you talk about a long-term vision. When I was a kid, all the farms and fields here, or a large part of them, what were they, remember? All of you have been here long enough time? Vegetables, table vegetables, corn, tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, and so on. What are they today? Soybeans. Not all of it, I know that. But a lot of conversions have been made. Wouldn't it be cool if we could convert them back again? And then go to get farm to the local food issues that you're all seeing and reading about if you're not participating in, where we're talking about, you talk about carbon footprint, we're getting our fresh vegetables today from California. Boy, that's smart. I mean, why aren't we growing them here and figuring out how to use them here? Well, that's part. You get credit for that. Farm market, if you have a farm market. Well, so we expanded it, and now I said, well, wait a minute, why don't we include communications? Hyperlocal news organizations, which some of you may have in your community. These little bloggers that turn into basically community forums, if you will, that when they're well done, they're really great. One of the best ones in New Jersey is called BaristaNet. It's in Montclair. Very successful hyperlocal news organization. But so we started giving points for a number of these things, and I think what it's done is it's almost like I tell people, it's like having an informal government. It's democracy at its best. You know, right now, if you get involved in something, let's say you want to be involved in, you have some problem that you want to have considered. Well, you go to a zoning board meeting or a planning board meeting or a town council meeting, very formalized process. You got 5 minutes for public comment. You get 30 seconds. They may or may not answer your question. I mean, it's very formalized. This Sustainable Jersey has become these networks of people informally getting together saying, how can we make this a better place to live and work and play? And so we're trying, and we're getting more and more creative about it, but that program alone has done a lot on sustainability, because sustainability is so much broader than just the issues of energy and the environment. So I think it's in a number of areas. It's in our education program, it's in Sustainable Jersey. It's frankly in a number of your organizations getting involved, because you're providing the kind of services that are making a sustainable community. So we got to figure out how to fold in the whole nonprofit world into that whole program. So if you haven't seen it, it's worth looking at. It's I think it's www.sustainablejersey.com. And if you look at it, it's a rich website. And in the process, Rutgers gave up the ghost on the Sustainable State Institute, and the head of it, Randy Solomon, moved over to TCNJ, and now the Municipal Land Center is in one location with all these things going on and Sustainable Jersey. So it's really quite a cool operation at the moment. Anyway, that was a long answer to a small question.
Thank you very much. Dr. Daggett, I thought you ran an inspiring campaign.
Thanks.
Kind of disappointed, but it's not every day I get a chance to get advice from a guy like you. So, with that, you got a room full of very motivated.
And remember, I'm getting paid for what I'm getting paid for, so take it with a grain of salt. Go ahead.
You get what you pay for, right? You got a room full of innovators, people that are excited, inspired, and ready to do something, right? We're a year out from your experience. I want a parting shot. Tell us what you learned. What do we need to do? Inspire us to make the difference that needs to happen.
Wow, I haven't been asked that question before. Running for governor is an interesting experience. I mean, it's first of all, it beats you down in every possible way you can imagine. But it's inspiring in that you get to see what people are doing in every community. You're getting to see things in ways that you don't often get a chance to do. And one of the things that I think come out of that for me is, again, my belief, one, in this state, in this entrepreneurial spirit of people. And now with Dodge, being able to do some of the things like the Sustainable Jersey program I just talked about, I think we've got to do a lot more in the research area that I talked about. It's not a lot of money. We have a $28 billion state budget. I can't believe we can't find a couple $1 million to throw toward churning the innovation world, if you will, and getting things going, getting people to think about things in new ways, and spurring new ideas and new programs and new businesses. I've been concerned a long time about higher education. I still think we don't do justice to higher education. We now, not to make this sound like a campaign speech, I spoke a lot about it during the campaign. We are 50th of the 50 states in this country in our support of higher education. It's appalling. We give fewer dollars to the higher education in New Jersey today than we did in the year 2000. Not percentage, fewer dollars. And we wonder why kids go out of state. We wonder why our schools are in debt, is because without state money, they went out and borrowed to build dorms and to build classroom space and all the other sorts of things that are going on. Now our state institutions are burdened under a pretty heavy amount of debt. We need to think about how we, use our resources. And then ultimately, I still believe that whether it's the plan that I put out or whether it's something else, but I think ultimately we have to make the tax system fairer, and it isn't by trying to slash every budget in government, because you could cut every single dollar of our government budget and you still couldn't balance the budget, and there still aren't enough revenues, basically, because of all these unfunded liabilities that we have. I mean, you could knock out all the services we provide, and you still wouldn't fix the problem financially. We need to if we're going to fix the property tax, we're going to probably have to not raise the sales tax. I had proposed expanding the sales tax to cover services not now covered, because right now we have this huge imbalance that the property tax takes, I think, something like 45% of our revenues come from the property tax in the state of New Jersey. That's why people are leaving. They can't afford it. So we need to somehow balance out the tax system. I don't care what the plan is, to be honest with you. It's just that we need to do that, and I worry that the parties can't stop yelling at each other enough to work together to do that. But overall, my biggest thing, I came out there a very positive feeling about the state of New Jersey. I lost, and I understand that. It's time to move on and do other things, and we need to do everything we can to support Chris Christie. He's the governor. We got to make him successful. Whether you agree with all his policies or not, it's in our interest as a group to make him successful, because if he's not, all of us fail, and the state goes down. So we got to figure it out. But I believe that I came out with this incredibly renewed passion and interest in this state and the people in it.
Good point to stop on.
Okay, well, one more question, last question.
Dr. Daggett, I'd just like to ask you, in our efforts to get grant money, it seems as though the Dodge Foundation may be a little more geared to visions and future. Is it true that most of the foundations or funders are of your opinion that you're looking for creativity, because so many seem to want the valuations and sustainability to be proven almost before you start? They're reluctant to invest their tight and very valued dollars in something that may not work.
I'm not optimistic that everybody's doing it that way, and we're not either, in the sense we have a number of, as those of you in the arts world know, we have a long and deep history of funding programs in the arts, and we fund people year after year that we think are doing well, but we also go out on the edge and try new things. Laura Packer's been doing this for years for us and done a remarkably great job. But I don't think people think of it that way. We are all worried about how every dollar is spent so much that I worry that we're not going on the creative side enough. And that's what I'm trying to fight against a bit, and why I am, I'd love, if you all have other ideas, the idea I had that I'm thinking about, and I really haven't gone too far on it yet, is to get my peers in the foundation community to each give a little bit of money and create this pot. And we'll do some juried program where, on a competitive basis, we'll get a group of people that are smart people that can take a look at applications coming in from a wide range of people and give out these $5,000 and $10,000 grants. $2 million out of the foundation community is not a lot of money. I think we should be able to do it, but we have to get coordinated. We have to create a process. We have to create, it's going to take a little bit of time, but we certainly are going against the trend doing that, because the trend still is, you're right, it's prove it before we give you the money. And you go, wait a second, that's why you're giving me the money, so I can prove it. But I'll thank you all, and I'm sorry that I'm not going to be able to stay for the whole thing, but I'll stay a little while longer.
For more information about the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey, visit www.npdcsnj.org. We produce this program in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. For everyone at the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and take good care.